Hey to all Metal Maniacs, welcome to another episode on High Horde channel. Here we are today with another video, but I'm taking a different subject this time. Usually I grab an album from my collection and title it as Album of the Week, but for this episode I will be taking a particular subject that focuses on the cultural aspect of heavy metal and spend a few words about it. Most of these subjects will be controversial, they are very polarizing subjects. Some will agree with me, some will not agree with me, and that is okay, you have every right to do so. Just keep in mind that obviously in the end I'm always right. Jokes apart, just feel free to put your comments on the video below and keep on evolving this discussion that I will start with this so-called rant. These are subjects that I have discussed a lot with my fellow friends and metalheads during the years, and now it's the right occasion for me to put them forward in this video in order to have, as I said, a bigger discussion on this subject. Sit tight, grab a beer, and off with this week's rant. Let's go. So thanks for joining us for another video on Iron Horde channel. What we do is here we review albums, we suggest bands, review festivals, speak about cultural aspects of heavy metal. So if this is something of interest to you, please consider subscribing, liking and sharing our videos on social media and with your friends. Now, as you have already seen from the subject title, my focus here will be the so-called elitism within the heavy metal scene, more specifically within the underground heavy metal scene. Before going forward and saying if I do agree or do not agree with that kind of attitude, I would like first of all to describe and say what elitism really is. And just keep in mind that the significance of the word varies from one community, from one culture to another. Whereas in some culture elitism might be frowned upon, and rightly so, and in other cultures, in other situations, modern cultures, elitism is somewhat of a necessary evil, so to speak. When we say elitism, it means that there are a group of individuals within a society, a community, a culture that feel that they are superior to the rest of the individual, and they might be superior in knowledge, superior in skills, superior because of race, superior because of class. Obviously not all situations are the same. Also, sometimes I feel that this word has become kind of a buzzword. Everyone starts mentioning it, more or less like everyone is using the word to refer to bands as epic metal, like everything is epic metal. I think there must be a bit more caution in using these words because they are not really always appropriate to describe that specific case that is being referred to. Now, as you can see, most of these descriptions, one would say, okay, if this is the case, I don't agree with having an elitist approach. And I would agree with that because in a healthy society, we cannot have this segregation of groups in the sense that we need to give everyone the same opportunities, everyone is on the same starting ground, and everyone succeeds according to his own merits, not according to which race he is born in or according to which class of family, or if they're wealthy, if they're poor. Everyone should have the same opportunities. But, and there's a big but with regards to minorities. One has to keep in mind that we are speaking about minorities such as heavy metal subculture, and I'm speaking here always referring to the underground, because when we speak about heavy metal as a mainstream culture, that kind of culture loses a lot of the ethos that we follow in heavy metal as an underground culture. So heavy metal is a minority compared to the mainstream society. And for every minority, for them to succeed, to be able to survive and not be eaten by the pressures of mainstream society, they have to kind of fight back. And the way to fight back is by not being influenced by that mainstream society and safeguarding your traditions, your culture, your land, because if we speak about minorities such as tribes, generally they don't like to be influenced by the Western men, so to speak. They fight him off. There are anthropological studies also where tribes fight off Western men, and they don't want him in their tribe, don't want them to be part of them, in order for them to control their territory. It can be an issue of fear of losing what you have, it can be an issue of not knowing who the other person is, so you are immediately afraid of him. But with regards to heavy metal, we have a good idea of who represents the threat in mainstream society towards heavy metal. The threat to heavy metal is the mainstream media, the big record labels. Those are the ones that pressure certain bands in order for these bands to modify their sound and make it more appealing. And they have every right to do so. But then they will be going outside of the heavy metal subculture and catering for a different crowd. So these bands which go out of this group, out of this subculture, they know that they're going to lose some people, they are going to reach a bigger audience. Obviously that audience hasn't got the same ethos as those forming part of the metal subculture, which generally tend to be more faithful, they are more involved in the band, they buy their music, they try to organize events with those bands, whereas the mainstream population just is a more consumeristic population, listens, throws away whenever she feels like, whenever, it's that kind of attitude. So there's a discrepancy between the two. And the band that takes a decision knows exactly what they're going to lose and what they're going to gain. Now it's up to them if they want to gain money or if they want to gain the respect from those people who really live heavy metal 24 hours a day. Doesn't mean that if you are a part of a subculture, you don't mingle with everyone else in society. I mean, this is not an exclusive society where you have to speak only to people who have your same interest. I mean, and that's the beauty of getting to know other people outside of that subculture, like traveling and whatever. But that doesn't mean that they're going to influence my choices within that subculture. I'm a kind of a very strict kind of person with regards to heavy metal, so I have a certain idea of what heavy metal should be like, the ethos, the whole package basically. Obviously there will be people that will tell me that is a bit too much for us, or we aren't so focused on such a one kind of sphere. And this is why a lot of people think of someone who is like myself, for example, as being elitist, as describing something which is not of liking to him, as not being part of heavy metal. Because when you are in a specific group, within a subculture that has its own traditions, has its own history, you are either going to embrace that history and that culture, or else it is not for you. In order for the subculture to survive, there must be a strict kind of code of conduct that really protects the subculture from the influence of the mainstream, to protect the subculture from having corporate big music labels infiltrate that subculture and changing those bands that have really made a mark in its history. Let's bring, for example, the biggest example, the most evident example of all, like Metallica. And it's quite evident that the style that Metallica loved, and I think they still do, is the style that they had in the first 3 and 4 of their album. But then a point came when they had to decide if they're going to stick with their style of music, reaching a smaller crowd, although they already had a big crowd at the time with that kind of thrash metal, or else modify a bit their sound to reach a wider audience. And obviously if you reach a wider audience, you will be making more money. Now, some of my friends sometimes tell me, yes, but bands evolve, they are not going to keep on playing the same thing over and over again. And you can evolve. But there are limits to the evolvement in order for you to stay within the parameters of that scene. You cannot evolve in a way that you completely change your sound, become almost a different band, and expect the people that were following you before to keep on praising you for the product you are releasing after you change your sound. I mean, this is something I think very normal. I support a football club like AC Milan, but if AC Milan decide from tomorrow to start playing cricket, I will not say yes, but clubs evolve. I don't like cricket, so I will find another team to support which is playing football. Many times I find people that they find it really difficult to understand this thing. And obviously heavy metal is about heaviness, is about aggressiveness, is about the rawness, the violence in the music. That is the basis of heavy metal. That is why it is a rebellious kind of music. It cannot conform to the mainstream society. Even the people that form part of it cannot conform to the mainstream society in a way that they lose that ethos, that DIY approach that makes up the basis of a heavy metal subculture. So, in conclusion, if we are going to define elitism in a music subculture, because this is important that we are speaking about a music subculture. We are not being elitist because we say we are superior to the poor. I'm rich and I'm superior to the poor. They have no say, they have no vote in elections because I'm superior. We're not saying that. We are speaking about a music subculture. So the term elitism here is a bit different, not a bit, quite different. We are saying that if you don't contribute to the scene, if you don't buy the merch, if you don't attend the gigs, if you don't organize, support the music in a way or another, most probably you are not really that attached to the music. And since we are a minority, since heavy metal is a minority, we need everyone to contribute, because the bands can produce their music with that little bit from everyone. As I said, since we are a relatively small community, we need the help, the bands, because I'm not in a band. I organize gigs, okay, and people attend once every while, but bands need the support constantly. Small record labels, they need your support constantly. It's important to say I'm not referring to the subculture to be a closed kind of subculture where no one can go in if you are not really that kind of 100% authentic metalhead, whatever that means in the end. But I believe that people who don't contribute to the scene, people who do not attend, people who always criticize that no band comes to my country, that no band comes to my city, to my region, and then plenty of small upcoming bands who are really good, they play there and you never see those kind of people. I mean, I don't like to take criticism or some kind of lessons from these kind of people, because for you to be able to criticize, first of all, you must contribute. Maybe this is an idealistic kind of approach, I don't know, but I've always seen the power of heavy metal in being able to resist pressures coming from the mainstream culture. And if metal loses that kind of barrier, that kind of buffer, then metal is bound to dissolve in a way that doesn't remain relevant to today's society, and it becomes one of the many kind of music genres that are just there just because of the music. Heavy metal is not just music, it is a subculture, it is a way of life, it is something that you live every day. It's not background music, it's music that you put on your headphones or your earbuds or whatever, and you close your eyes and you listen to that music religiously. Some people agree with me, others, most I think, will not agree with me. But I don't like those kind of 50-year-olds who still listen to those dozen bands, the tip of the iceberg. They are there to criticize, then they don't contribute to anything. Mind you, attending, being a fan, supporting bands, that is the biggest kind of contribution. So I'm not saying here you need to organize an event or you need to be in a band or else you are a poser or something like that. Heavy metal, like most of the things in life, are supported, are there, are made out of fans. And when I say fans, I mean that even the bands themselves, they have to be fans. It's not like you go and play in a show and after you finish you leave and go back home. You need to stay there to support the other bands, to see metal, because if you play in a band, you like metal. If there's a festival, if there's a gig and other bands are playing, you stay there and listen to the other bands. One time when we had the Malta Doom Metal Festival, we had Venom Inc. playing with Tony Dolan, Jeff Dunn Mantas and Tony Bray, Abaddon, iconic figures in heavy metal. They came over the 2 days of the festival, they stayed there watching the bands. Even after they finished, they came out and watched the band which played after them. So that is the kind of heavy metal attitude that needs to be there in order to safeguard the borders of heavy metal, or else it will fizzle out in just being any kind of music, to a certain extent the same end that punk had in the 80s, where it became a fashion rather than a subculture with a rebellious attitude, and even celebrities started wearing punkish attire, and all that shock value was gone. And this is not to say that young people, youths coming into the heavy metal scene need to be patronized or need to be shunned because they haven't got the knowledge of older metalheads. That's when I was in my mid-teens and starting to get into heavy metal, I didn't know even myself what kind of music I really loved. I had no one in my family who listened to heavy metal, no friends who listened to heavy metal. What I got into heavy metal, I got every time by myself, by searching, by looking at videos on television, and from one band I find another band. Rarely initially someone actually came up to me and told me listen to this and listen to that. Very rarely. And the last thing I wanted is to attend a gig or something and the older generation starts questioning me, if you like that, and that band is rubbish and whatever. It's not that the case. On the contrary, I'm not a 50-year-old, but I'm not a 20-year-old either. So I have been meeting new bands coming up. Maybe they have to still find their sound, and I support them wholeheartedly because that's what we need to do to encourage these young people, and eventually they will find their own feet and find the sound they want. But people who generally listen to heavy metal and they don't support the events, they don't buy, they just listen on Spotify, on YouTube, they download illegally. For me, heavy metal would do better without these kind of people. And if they come up to me and tell me, look, I like heavy metal, I listen to heavy metal. Okay, everyone can listen to heavy metal, but you are not a metalhead. You are not one of us. You cannot eat at our same table, the ones that really put their heart and soul into the scene. Not only the music, into the whole scene. Music is the biggest part of the heavy metal scene, but it isn't the only part. That is what I regard as elitism, and that's why I think being elitist in this way in heavy metal is a positive thing, because you can really filter out those who are there because it is a fashion, because it is a trend, and those who are there and who will remain there until the day they die. There's no such thing as I used to listen to heavy metal. You used to listen, okay, to heavy metal, but we were never into heavy metal. Because when you are into heavy metal, you are born like that. At least from my perspective, I used to listen to music even before I even knew what heavy metal was all about. And I never liked it, and I never felt part of it. The first time I listened to something heavy, it clicked with me immediately. So in my case, I don't know in your case, but in my case, I was born loving or needing heavy metal in my life, and I will die like that. There's no two ways about it. Obviously, as I told you in the beginning, this is the way I see it. I understand if you do not agree with me. I have used to that by now. You have every right for that, and as they say, I will fight for your right to be able to say that, even if I don't agree with you. You cannot be so instinctive in these kind of subjects. You have to think about them over and over again before arriving at a certain point and saying, yes, I think this is my decision, this I agree with, this I don't agree with. So put down your comments in the sections below with your ideas and what you think and what you believe in. Let's start a discussion, let's debate between us, because this is not a one-man show. I'm here to start the discussion, and then it's up to you all to continue with that discussion. Nothing for me left to say. I remind you to click on that subscribe button, on the like, share on social media, on forums with your friends, whatever. Let's increase the numbers on this channel and make it one where everyone is free to say his own opinion. I think in the end that will be an asset to heavy metal. So that is all for me. I hope you like this video. I hope you find it interesting. Until the next episode, stay safe and metal on. Cheers.